So if you talk to sales leadership, they're like, well, we're losing because of product features. Like we can't compete, right? And he's like, no, I don't think that's it. Right. And so he ran this competitive intelligence program. And what he found was like, no, it's rarely ever a feature thing. It's almost always a sales process thing. They're
Mm.
not seeing the value in you as much as they're seeing it in the other. And you're selling the same things, right?
Yeah, interesting.
And so he was able to bring that to the overall leadership and be like, hey, like these are the reasons that we're losing to this competitor, and these are fixable things.
Welcome to the Win-Loss Podcast for Product Marketers. I'm Trenton Romp, the head of marketing at Closed, and joining me on this podcast is
Scott Knudsen, head of sales enablement at Closed. Closed, for our listeners who've been with us from the beginning,
right.
the leading provider of win-loss analysis services and tech.
In this podcast, Scott and I are going to talk about how product marketers can use win-loss analysis to succeed at reaching their top goals and initiatives.
Things like win rates, sales enablement, product roadmap,
marketing efficiency, competitive intelligence, and churn and retention.
all the things.
All of the things. Product marketers are tasked with all of the things.
What are we talking about today, Trent?
Today, we're going to dive deep into how to use win-loss analysis for competitive intelligence. So one of the main initiatives that product marketers get tasked with is competitive intelligence. There's also an entire career track around competitive intelligence that some product marketers land in. And today we're going to talk about how product marketers should be using win-loss analysis to gain an even greater competitive advantage in their marketplace. There's many competitive intelligence tools out there that can help you gather good information on competitors in your space, but win-loss analysis can bring a deeper understanding and more comprehensive approach to your competitive knowledge and strategy. So we're going to dive into that.
It's going to be a good time.
It's going to be a great time. It's always a great time with you, Scott.
Always. 100% guaranteed great time.
That's exactly right. So to start off, let's talk about a story from my youth. Let's go back.
This is what this
is why people sign.
This is what the people have been waiting
That's
for.
what they've always wanted. You've waited so many episodes. So let me tell you the story of my last youth American football game, and probably the reason I quit playing American football. So I was pretty fast as a kid. I wasn't strong, so I had to be fast because I had to run away from my older brother. Right. And so I was called in whenever we needed what's called a reverse trick play.
Right.
So it'd be like this sneaky play where the ball is snapped and it's almost handed off to like several people, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere,
The jet sweep
comes swinging around with his jets blazing, and I get the ball and I'm coming out of the other side where nobody expects, right? So we do one of these plays, and I get the ball and I'm running up the sideline and I'm free and clear, like no one's even close to me. And I thought for sure, I'm going to get my first touchdown.
This is it.
This is it. This is the career I've been waiting for.
This is the first touchdown of many touchdowns to come.
I'm going to get full ride scholarships, all, the whole 9 yards, right? So I'm running down the field as hard as I can. And I hear from the sideline my dad literally say to me, "Run, don't look back." So what do you think I did? Totally looked back. Like, what do you mean? What's behind me? I look back, almost like a full body turn, which I don't know if you've
Bad
ever
idea.
run as fast as you can.
It slows you down a little bit.
Slows you down a little bit, right? Next thing I know, out of nowhere, this other kid had caught up to me, and because I looked back and slowed down, he grabbed me by the back of the jersey and just slowly and very wimpily tackled me to the ground, pretty much at like the 1 or 2 yard line. And for people that don't know American football, it's like as close as you can get to scoring
Right.
without actually scoring. And I never scored a touchdown in the rest of my career. And I always remembered that moment. And I was so mad at my dad. Like, why did you say anything? Just tell me, don't say anything.
I would have
right?
done it.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like there's a lot of companies that are running their competitive intelligence programs, or they're running their go-to-market strategies the same way I was trying to score a touchdown, where they have their boss or they have somebody, their dad on the sideline saying, "What about this competitor? Turn around, like don't look back," or whatever, right?
Yeah. Bringing your attention to something
exactly.
that ultimately you end up
Like,
kind of fumbling on.
You don't need to focus so hard on the competition that you lose sight of the buyers, and you lose sight of what actually makes you win in the marketplace or lose that you could go fix.
So we've come up with kind of 5 talking points and ultimately 3 key takeaways for our listeners, all centered around competitive intelligence. What an anecdote, Trent.
Thank you.
So yeah, as just Trent mentioned, we obviously at Closed, we believe that win loss, having a win loss program, whether you're doing that yourself or you are investing in a third party like us, we believe that should be kind of the foundation of your competitive intelligence program, right? A lot of
Yeah.
people, it's probably fair to assume there's some companies out there they are the competitor coming into the market, so they know the big kid on the
Right.
playground who they're
Right.
trying to take down. Other times you are the big kid and you are unaware that that some kid is coming to push you off the top of the slide, right? And I think sometimes it's easy to identify who they are, but sometimes it's a little more tricky to understand how much of a threat they are and why they're a threat. I think that distinction is important.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of using win loss to initially guide your competitive program, especially in categories you're creating. So you don't really know what your competition is,
Right.
or as the gorilla in the marketplace, so to speak, where you need to kind of keep track of who are the up and comers that we haven't really paid attention to or we don't even know about because there could be a ton of them in really competitive markets. And I think we've shared this story many times where we have customers of ours that have told us go and figure out why we lose against this competitors. And then after we do a bunch of interviews, it turns out they weren't losing to that competitor. They were losing to this other one, or they were losing to the status quo, or they were competing against something completely different that wasn't even on their radar.
Totally.
So that's why I like competitive intelligence being based in win-loss analysis, because a lot of competitive intelligence programs I've seen are more focused on what you can find just by Googling things, and less focused in your buyer's
Right.
perspective.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you could have a really flashy competitor who has all the bells and whistles in the world, and you can maybe even make assumptions from that. I had a great long conversation at a PMA event, and he kind of expressed this where he said, I talked to the sales leadership, and there was a much bigger competitor in the market. They had more of a market dominance, and they were kind of coming in trying to take away market share.
Mhm.
And if you talk to the sales leadership, they'd say, "Oh, they've been around longer than us. They have more features than us, right? We are a more cohesive tool, but they just kind of buy up lots of companies and stitch them all together, right?" And so if you talk to sales leadership, they're like, "Well, we're losing because of product features. Like we can't compete, right?" And he's like, "No, I don't think that's it." Right. And so he ran this competitive intelligence program. And what he found was like, no, it's rarely ever a feature thing. It's almost always a sales process thing. They're
Mm.
not seeing the value in you as much as they're seeing it in the other. And you're selling the same things, right?
Yeah, interesting.
And so he was able to bring that to the overall leadership, and be like, hey, like these are the reasons that we're losing to this competitor, and these are fixable things. It's sales process, it's urgency, right? It's how do we establish a better, stronger brand for ourselves? It's some of these things that as opposed to, hey, we just got to build this extra whistle on the bike,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, because you see that many times where, oh, so and so just launched this new feature that we don't have.
Right.
And you're trying to play the product parity game. We need to build that feature too. Obviously, if they're building it, we need to have it. And you don't even know. Maybe you just saw it on a press release, or you saw on their website, or you saw at some event they held that they announced that new feature, and you immediately think, I need to go
We
and
got to
buy it.
build that.
Yeah, that's when you start focusing too much on the competitor. If you don't have really good, rich buyer feedback to know for sure, does that feature help you win in the market more?
Right.
And that's I just see it way too often.
So we talked about sales a little bit. Really, these competitive intelligence programs that you're building, they help impact essentially every key department at a company, right? The ones that we often talk about are sales, but also marketing, product, customer success, right?
Mhm.
And again, it's all kind of weaves together where a lot of what we do in these organizations, in these departments, is we make assumptions, right? And then, like, just as you said, like, on the marketing side of things, you might see, oh, our competitor just added a chatbot.
Yeah.
They must be driving a bunch of business through
Right.
chat. We gotta get a chatbot.
Mhm.
We gotta go spend, 5 grand a month on a chatbot or
Mhm.
whatever, right? That might be making 0 impact on their business,
Right.
right? Like the lead response may not be even an issue, right? but that's going to shape how you what you invest in, right?
Yep.
And is it better for you as a marketing leader to say, well, I'm going to go do a bunch of demos with the chat bot and I'm going to get it integrated and spend all this time configuring the chat rules only to find out that like it doesn't actually drive you any more business because what people are really looking for are better PPC funnels to hear about your better incentives to buy or whatever
Yeah.
other campaign, right?
Yeah, that's one thing I love about the way win-loss analysis helps me compete better as a marketing leader is, for one, it helps me compete better on how we're winning. Like, that's obvious,
Right.
right? And I can understand, okay, how do we need to position ourselves better? What are the strengths we need to lean into on content, on collateral, on sales enablement stuff? But the other piece is it helps me understand how to win more before the decision's even made. Like, how do I actually win to get the opportunity in the first place? How do I win top of funnel? And I feel like some competitive intelligence programs I've seen where they go and make a SWOT analysis, or they go sign up for demos, or they're watching the website, or they go and look at press releases, or whatever it might be, or I've even seen some people convince friends to go sign up for a demo and then share all the notes in the demo with them. And these are all things that competitive intelligence people have used in the past, or are ways that people have used to get competitive research. And one thing I see in that is it still doesn't tell me, to your point, like if I go to a competitor's website and they have a chat bot on there, or I can tell they're using a different marketing automation tool,
Right.
or the way they're organizing their content, or I can even see like, oh man, they just launched this kind of a content series, or they went to this event. I still have no idea if those things are helping them
If it's really
win.
converting.
Yeah, like one good example is at another company I was at, we had a competitor go nuts on G2 when it was early on. We were like the Goliath and they were like a challenger brand. And they went really deep on G2 and they ended up with way more reviews than us. And I kept getting from my boss, like the dad from the sideline, like, hey, you need to
We
look
got to
at
get our G2
yeah,
fixed.
G2. Like, I think we're losing there like crazy. So we went and set up, we spent a ton of time. We spent a good amount of money with G2, setting up reviews, like doing everything we could to get reviews. And eh, we spent like a year on this initiative. And then I was just like, man, I just feel like this is a really big waste of time, honestly.
Right.
But I went and asked just some of our customers and our buyers that we thought they had given us G2 reviews, and I asked them simply like, "Did G2 ever like come into your buyer's journey ever?"
Right.
No. Like the first time I heard about G2, they told me was when you told me to do a review. So
I didn't
like,
even know what it was.
yeah, exactly. Till you offered me money to do a review for you.
Totally.
And so that's what I mean. Like you can get so narrowly focused on, well, what are they doing in marketing? And you can be watching the public things that they're doing or signing up for their demos and thinking, oh, that must be how they're winning. But in reality, if you're not basing it in buyer feedback and in win loss analysis and really understanding what the marketing is doing to win top of funnel
Right.
and bottom of funnel, that you might be focusing on completely the wrong methodologies.
Yeah, we see this in sales a lot too, right? Where you say, okay, here's from a product, well, the thing we sell, here's why we sell it. Here are the things that we do no one else does. Here are the differentiators, right? Um, but when you're going up head to head, especially the more complicated of a thing you're selling, the more expensive it is. It's pretty common you're in a bake off with a couple other competitors, right?
Yeah.
As you get into these buyer journeys as a seller, if it's one big umbrella of, well, here's why we beat the competition in quotation marks, it's like, well, that can be helpful, but it also can totally miss the mark.
Hmm.
When you're able to differentiate between competitor A, B, C, no decision, like all these true competitors, and able to drill and be like, okay, when we go up against this competitor, they like somebody who's interested in us and them has a different set of priorities typically than somebody who goes up against competitor B and us, right?
Hmm.
And it's really important to understand that distinction. If you don't have that data, you can have battle cards, you can do a whole bunch of preliminary research, which is not bad stuff to have. But at the end of the day, like you don't really know what's driving them to choose them over you,
Right.
right? You can think, just as you said, oh, it must be because of X. but you don't really know.
Yeah.
And so that's something we focus a lot on, which is as these interviews come in, both on the win-loss side, but also on the kind of the business insights side of things, I'm looking for, okay, what were factors in the deal? And how
Mhm.
many of those factors can I stack in the deck for my sellers? So it's like, hey, when you go up against this competitor and you know that you will, talk this way, bring
Mhm.
up these things, right?
Right.
And frame it this way, right? Like in certain cases, it makes more sense to be more aggressive. In certain cases, it makes more sense to be more defensive or whatever, right? It's a different play for each competitor, and win loss can help sales leaders and sellers understand that.
Yeah, one of the interesting takeaways there for sales teams specifically is a lot of competitive professionals are trying to enable sellers with like training, like you're just talking about how to approach this deal, this head-to-head deal, or with battle cards, or with different content they can send. But one thing that you just alluded to that when loss analysis can separate and do even further is help you understand the communication style,
Yeah,
the level of empathy you should have for that type of buyer and the whole sales process. It's like, okay, I know if I'm going against this competitor, yeah, I've got battle cards. I know these features are better in with against this competitor. But with win loss analysis, you could literally be like, I also know that we have a less aggressive sales motion. Like I know that this competitor is really overly aggressive. They're really like pushing timelines hard on
right.
buyers.
Yeah,
They're forcing them to make decisions faster than they want to. So if you know that because you've done win loss and the buyer talked about that in a win loss
right,
interview, like, well, the reason we went with you against this competitor is because those guys are really pushy.
right,
You know that, and you know buyers don't love that. You could lean into that even a little bit more
right,
and say things in your messaging that's like, "Hey, I know this is a really important decision. You probably wanna take your time with this," and, like, really be on
right.
the side of the buyer.
Differentiate. Yeah,
Yeah,
push.
exactly.
We're not trying to
Yeah,
have you make a decision this week.
totally. So you're differentiating not only with your demo and your features,
Right.
but you're also just, as a salesperson individually, differentiating in your personality and in your approach
Yeah.
to the way you go about that sales motion.
Yeah, I think this on the other side of the fence on the customer side, right? We talk about churn and why people leave. It's a similar kind of story, right?
Mhm.
It's slightly different because when you've won a deal, right? Like you can kind of understand what the factors ended up rolling up into that decision. But you have a new set of things of okay, what kept them here, right? It's not necessarily. Is it a product thing? Is it a human thing? We don't really know. Like, it's really hard to get that sense, right? And again, what win-loss can provide, on the competitive intelligence side is, are you losing because they don't want it or need it anymore, and that's the story you're getting fed,
Mhm.
right? We have vendors who we talk about in a in a negative way. We're like, "Ah, these like, we wish we could go with these guys, but,
Right.
we're locked in right now,"
Mhm.
And if we do switch to their competitor, right, we're not gonna write them a formal letter and like, "This is why,"
You don't do that?
like, we're not gonna do that, right?
Right.
And odds are they're not gonna ask us about it,
Yeah.
right? So, what this allows you to do by being win-loss focused when it comes to your competitive intelligence, you wanna know, yeah, top of funnel leads coming in, you wanna know kind of at the front door, what's causing people to come in and not go in. And then once they're inside the house, what's causing them to not just leave the house, but to go to your competitor's house,
Yeah,
right? Specifically,
mhm.
because if it's something that you can control on the CS side of things, you got to know that. If it's, hey, this has nothing to do with product. It has everything to do with outreach. It has
Mm.
everything to do with the post customer value experience.
Mhm.
That's all controllable,
Yeah.
right? If it's a product thing, we want to know that too, right? And this kind of leads into that last tier of like product just like anything, like we talked about, like, do we need to build this thing?
Mhm.
I've worked at lots of companies where they felt like they needed to build the thing. In some cases, they were too early. In some cases, it was a total whiff. In some cases, they were too late. It's tough to know.
Yeah.
Like, it's a complicated thing deciding what things to prioritize, which initiatives to shift. I walked over to our product team a week ago and I was like, I have this great idea.
Mhm.
And I told them about it and the thing I wanted, and they're like, yeah, this is great. Like, this is like really great feedback, right? That's one conversation I had with them. They have to weigh my own personal opinion on this matter against 100 other things they could build.
Yeah, absolutely.
While my feedback is good, it's not the same as a buyer who's saying, "I don't think we're gonna renew with you guys unless you can do this."
Yeah,
You
exactly.
know, or we're about to do X, and if we don't have this integration, like, it's gonna cost us money.
Yeah.
Huge difference there, right?
Mm.
And so again, leaning into competitive intelligence, like, having that be a focus as it affects each department, I think is huge.
Yeah, yeah, like you said on the product side. Um, it's one thing to just build features because you think this is a really cool feature set or this is a cool way to solve this problem that you imagined is in
Right.
the market,
Yeah.
or that a really smart person in your company is so smart that they think they're smarter than the entire market, and they're like, we should do this feature. And then you do feature, 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 right? Or you're playing the feature parity game. You're just chasing features all day long of other companies.
Right.
It's that's one way to do a product roadmap. The other way is you should be building your product to make you win.
Yes.
And when you base your competitive intelligence program in win-loss analysis and it gives you that data back, here is why you're specifically losing based entirely around just your product feedback, right?
Right.
You're missing this feature. You're including 3 features here that none of us ever use, but you're charging for them. So you're
Yes.
way overpriced.
Yes.
So it's not even just product like feature sets, it's how you fence your product and your pricing, and things like that. So I think uh, competitive intelligence based in win-loss analysis can definitely help you build the right product roadmap to win better.
So we talk to a lot of customers, obviously, in our industry, and we get a lot of feedback on why having win-loss programs at the forefront of competitive intelligence is huge. Do we have any quotes or testimonials or any stories that you think would be relevant for our listeners?
Yeah, totally. So we have some cool clips that I wanted to share. One of them, though, is from Jason Klein, who was a product marketer, mostly focused on competitive intelligence when he started working with us, and now he's a product marketing director. But when I talked with him, he told me that he'd been on a good career trajectory at his company, and but then he shared that he wouldn't be as quickly promoted as he was without win-loss analysis as the core.
Oh,
He literally became known as the win-loss guy at his company, and he would get win-loss feedback, and he would aggregate it, and he would put it into a newsletter, and he would send out this newsletter company-wide every month, and that was his competitive intel, like, core
smart.
program. Yeah. So every interview that came in that we would do, and all the data that was coming together every month, he would aggregate that, he would summarize it, he would pull quotes from it, and he would send that out as a monthly newsletter to the entire company. It's like, here is why we are competing really well or really poorly in our market. And he has attributed being the win-loss guy to like accelerating his career growth, which is really cool.
It's way cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the product marketers listening out there, that is the way to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that is what we feel like we're offering is like, "Hey, here's all this data, all this heavy lifting that we wanna give to you so that you can do things like that,
Right.
where you can accelerate your career, you can actually solve legitimate business problems, you can turn the ship, you can help be integral and be like, 'Oh, this is a huge problem, and I
Sure.
helped identify it, and I helped turn the ship.'" And,
Yeah.
like, that can be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're sitting there watching a competitor's every move and you see they just launched this new feature on or this new product line, we need to go compete with that, and you're being the squeaky wheel around that narrative, that's not going to be as effective as, yeah, I know they just launched that, I'm tracking it, but here's what all of our buyers are saying. None of them care about that feature. They all actually want this thing solved instead, and it's not even a feature. Like they actually just want us to focus harder on the sales process or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's making
Yeah,
an existing thing just a little bit, more digestible or
yeah,
whatever.
exactly. So that's how you should be doing it. There's another clip I wanted to share. So Monique Edelton is the head of competitive intelligence at Qualtrics. She's brilliant at her job, and I just wanted to share this clip really quick about her experience using win loss to fuel her competitive intelligence program. So we'll play this here.
I've been using win loss information in my role across a number of companies for about 15 years now. It's one of the most invaluable programs that companies can run for a myriad of reasons. I find that it provides just invaluable insight into our customers, their perspectives, their motivations, and their challenges that really drive their buying decisions. It's helpful for us to understand the context under which they're evaluating solutions and ultimately, what's driving those buying decisions. Within competitive intelligence specifically, it really helps us to understand the broader competitive landscape, the key and emerging competitors, and how we're being perceived by our customers versus those competitors, our strengths, our weaknesses, and most importantly, our differentiators in the eyes of our customers. So that's really, how win loss is contributing to our competitive intel function.
So I love what she said there about they use win-loss analysis to understand the customer's perspective of how they compare to their competitors.
Totally.
As it's totally different if you are living and breathing your product, you're living and breathing your company, you're living and breathing your competitive landscape, and you go and check out your competitor, your perspective is going to be totally different
Totally.
than a buyer that may not be as educated as you are, may be more educated than you are about the solution. But what matters most is the buyer's perspective, not your perspective by watching your competitor nonstop.
I have a cautionary tale about this.
Love it.
So one of my first jobs in tech, they were at the time the belle of the ball. They were the it company to work for. They'd raised a bunch of money. They were doubling their revenue everything was just great. They were like a premier partner with Salesforce, and two up and comers who were small at the time, just these small little Chrome extensions. They kind of popped up and they just kind of started getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And they were newer technology. They didn't have some of the baggage that this company had. But the company, I think, too late found out that these competitors were like chopping off the legs from beneath them. And then the company made a really important decision. They said, okay, well, here's what we do, and here's what they do. We can do what they do if we stop building and maintaining what we're doing and just shift it into what they're doing and then kind of staple it together. And then we'll be the best of both worlds. So they made this decision. They said, well, the market seems to be shifting towards what these guys are offering and away from what we've been offering. Let's follow the market. Let's put all our resources in this new tech and it'll be great. Now, I can't say that is the reason this company no longer exists, but it was a very pivotal decision they made. And at the end of the day, what ended up happening was they were under the impression that everybody wanted this new style of tool. And all their buyers were not that interested in that style of tool. They just wanted the stable version of the tool they had. And so what they did was they abandoned their existing customer base to try and build a new customer base. And in so doing, they lost their existing customer base. And the tool that they were building was not as good or fast or as competent as the ones who'd been doing it for the last 18 months.
Mm.
So they were behind on the new tech. And they were bleeding out customers on the old tech, right? And at the end of the day, you fast forward a few years, they no longer exist, right?
Yeah.
Lots of other decisions I'm sure factored into that, but it's a good example of one. I know they wouldn't have a win-loss program in competitive intelligence in the way that they're done today, in the way that they're offered today, right? But I think importantly, the type of tool they sold and what they thought people wanted were different. And it was hard for them to like be okay with this other competitor existing that had a different approach and that they felt like, no, we have to own the entire space or
Mhm.
else we're going to lose.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, they made a bad business decision that cost them kind of everything. So obviously that's a really grandiose example of this, but I think we see this a lot where, yeah, you view what a customer is and the threat that they are.
Mhm.
And if your customers or your potential buyers don't view them that way, right? You need to know that.
Mm.
You need to know how are they? What is your reputation? Are you viewed as the seasoned expert and they're viewed as the snippy up and comer who doesn't know what they're doing. Yeah, it's flashy, but it's not reliable, right? Like if your perception is that great, you need to know that, and you need to reestablish that in your sales process. That needs to trickle out through your customer experience managers, right? Like that needs to permeate. If you don't know that, then it's red flags, it's panic buttons. We gotta shift, we gotta jump to the other side of the boat, or else we're gonna sink. And it's like, no, by doing that, you sunk your own boat, right?
Yeah, I think it brings to mind another company. This is like the ultimate example of not doing competitive intelligence with the idea that it needs to be thought of through your buyer's perspective. And that is your buyers don't even know a competitor exists.
Right.
Like they're so small, they haven't even really made waves. Nobody knows they exist. But for some reason, you're so focused on the competitive landscape that you went out and found them and sought them out and figured out all the ways you're better than them. So then the next thing you do is you go create a landing page that's like, why us versus them? Right. And you just literally gave them free brand awareness.
Right.
Like, well, your buyers didn't even know they existed.
Right.
You didn't need to do that. There was no reason to even talk about them, to even mention them.
Right.
None of your buyers knew about them. Nobody was. You weren't competing with them.
And not really. Like they can technically competed with you. But
Yeah, you think that they did. It's your perspective.
yeah.
But your buyers haven't even thought about them yet. And all of a sudden now, like you're helping them compete with you.
Right.
You've brought awareness about them. Your buyers, if they landed somehow on that page from some other way, right now they are thinking, well, maybe there is some other solution I should look at.
Right.
So it's like that's why you need to think about it. And yeah, you have competitors. Yeah, they might be doing other things, like they might be attacking the market a different way. But are your buyers thinking about the market that way?
Right.
Do the buyers even care? Do the buyers know that that competitor exists or that tool exists? And track it for sure, but track it from the buyer's perspective, not from your deep,
Right.
research process. And you're spending hours and hours and hours thinking and searching for all the different competitive possibilities out there, right?
Totally.
Awesome.
So if we were to surmise what we've talked about today, Trent, into 3 key takeaways, because if anyone's like me, I have a short attention span. Give me the three takeaways.
Right.
So takeaway number 1, it's important. It's very important to use a win-loss program to direct your competitive intelligence. Right. So that's takeaway 1. Those should be intermingled. You shouldn't have, well, Sherry, she's doing competitive intelligence and I'm focused on win-loss. It's like, no. You guys should be collaborating. You guys should be on the same page. Number 2, your win-loss data can help improve competitive intelligence and initiatives, not just in sales, but essentially across all departments. You should be thinking about your competitors, how you're winning and losing against them, and that should shape a lot of how you train your sales reps and how you build your marketing landing pages and what products you prioritize, right? And then number 3, don't focus so much on your competitors that you lose sight of your buyers. Don't be Trenton, little 8-year-old Trenton running down the field, worried too much about the competition that it cost him a future Hall of Fame glory.
American football.
All pro.
I'm sure that was in the cards for me.
It's because you focus too much on the competition and not actually what turned into more deals and less losses.
All right, Scott, that was an awesome summary. Great episode. If you'd like to learn more about using Closed for win-loss analysis and how we power competitive intelligence programs, you can head over to winlossexperts.com. There's a great ebook there to download, and it can get you started or help you improve.
You're going to like the way you do win-loss program. We guarantee it.
Until next time.
See ya.